Well, hello, everybody, and welcome. This is, let me think, webinar 9 of 10. Oh, we're at the end. We're at the end of the summer of our Klett Flag Collaborative Webinar Summer Series. We're kind of calling it. My name is Meredith White. I am the president of Flag, and I'm super excited tonight about our conversation because, as we were just saying, I feel like it's one that, like, if you're not in a leadership role, you're not really privy to, but you might have some thoughts about. And I think it's so important to have. So I'm super excited. I don't know what side she's on for you, but she's here for me. Wait, no, this way. This is Melanie Hutsell. Melanie, will you tell us where you are and what you do? I know those things, but tell us about yourself.
I am a French teacher, but I am also the department chair and have been at Peachtree Ridge High School. This is my 20th year of both. They hired me as department chair, which is an interesting story unto itself, really. I don't know that I would necessarily recommend
Totally forgot that. Mm-hmm.
Unless you replace somebody awful like I did, because then you can't do anything wrong. But anyway, so yeah. So
Dang, I totally forgot that. That is like when I graduated undergrad, I came in and finished out the year for somebody, which I also do not recommend at all, because it was like,
no,
you
I
don't
don't
know
recommend
what
that
you're, I
either.
mean, you kind of know what you're coming into, maybe, but then you're just like, oh no. And we all know, I mean, teaching obviously is personal in general, but world language teaching, especially because it's like so much identity work, like immediately it's like, let's, hear your target language. Let's see where you've been or not, and all those kind of things. Like, geez, you're so exposed. If somebody were to say to you, so I've said this before, and I've said this in previous webinars for sure in this series, but I've said it in a bunch also. I mean, like so many things, but like my first thought is like the most transparent, the most intentional, and the most thoughtful department chair I've ever had. So, like, not to discredit or disrespect anybody previously, but having been with you for 7 years, and if somebody, so knowing your experience there, I appreciate all those things about you. What would you say to somebody who said, I'm not a department chair, I'm not in any kind of like overt leadership role, but I'm interested in being one? Do you recommend it? What do you think? What would be your response to that? Or what kind of advice would you give if you had any advice?
It would be asking what the interest level was, because some people don't necessarily, because it is a type of teacher leadership.
Yeah.
And there are other leadership roles in education that are not necessarily teacher leadership. So it's like, what are you looking, why are you, what's your interest?
Mm-hmm.
And then based on the answer there, I mean, is it because you like working with other teachers and you want to help other teachers? Well, then, yeah, this is a path for you.
Mm-hmm.
Is it because you're trying to simply step into administration? Well, you know what? You don't necessarily have to be a department chair to do that, depending on where you are.
Mm-hmm.
And so it would actually be to answer that question with more questions, just because there's different types of leadership in thinking about all of the hats that you end up wearing as a department chair, whether you mean to or not.
Right. Oof.
So that's not probably the answer that you wanted,
No, not at
but
all.
you
That's
really need
perfect.
to explore the
Mm-hmm.
intent to it.
Yeah.
I was at a point where I wanted to transition positions for personal reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the department chair part of it really intrigued me because I was ready to do some teacher leadership.
Yeah.
And what that looks like on any given day is very hard to define. And, like we
Yeah.
were talking about, before we really got started, the role of a department chair in a building is kind of based on your administration as well.
Mm.
And so mine right now isn't perhaps as official. I don't have as many, like I don't have evaluative responsibilities right now like I used to.
Yeah.
It is more on a personal, subtle,
Mm-hmm.
interpersonal
Mm-hmm.
way, and creating a vibe for the department, which I think is actually very important.
Absolutely.
Making sure that everybody in the department kind of puts themselves aside for the good of the group.
Yeah. Well, and you're so good at that. And like non-negotiables. I feel like you're really picky with your non-negotiables. Like if it's something like you have to do this, sorry. it's like clear why. And there's only like two things, you know, or like I can't imagine you as like a micromanager or as,
God, no.
yeah, because like ew, you know, I don't see that as something you would enjoy doing or like having done. And I appreciated that about you too. But like I also feel like if there was an issue, it would be like, okay, now we need to talk about X and Y. You know, your
There
grade
are
book's out of control, or you haven't taken attendance in 6 weeks.
there are department chairs in Gwinnett County who I work with who
Mhm.
very much are micromanaging.
Oh, yeah.
And every now and then I used to think, gosh, maybe
Mm.
I should be more like that. And then I think about just what that would entail for me personally, and I'm not gonna do it, but I've never had to be. I'm
Mm.
lucky to be in a place, I think, where I've never had to be micromanaging, and that when there are, some of that ticky-tacky stuff about the grade book, attendance, which is a little out of my realm, but instructional calendars, things like that, we can sort of talk about it and come to a consensus.
Yeah.
So that's a fortunate that I have for where I am. And some of that I think is also because I have been department chair for so long.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and the experience seems nice too, because yeah, like you said, like the evolution of leadership, the evolution of styles, and then the evolution of people, you know, just like in and out, surely would
And the
change some things.
and the teaching profession itself at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And where we are as a field, as a school, as a profession, like as all of it, like students, like that has evolved greatly as well.
Yeah. Super true. I know when we were like thinking of titles and all those things, which I loved yours, the good, the awkward, and the, you know, like what would you say like
Did I come up with that when I
I
looked at
think
it?
so. Yeah, I think
I
so. Like, yes,
came up with that. Okay.
nailed it. I think when I don't know, it's so again, like when I think of covert leadership, overt leadership, like there are so many conversations, obviously, that when, you know, as a person in a department, not department chair, you're of course not privy to, you know, you're just like, well, I hope that person got talked to, you know, or whatever, if you think that. But those conversations behind the scenes, all that work behind the scenes, I even think about just you being like so available so early, like logistically in the mornings of like, okay, we need to do X and Y, like so and so's out, we need to do the things like all of the work that kind of goes unseen in some ways. What would you say if we went from the title like the awkward, you know, the good, the awkward, the ugly, like what is the awkward, what is the ugly, what's some stuff that people might go, oh, I don't know if I want to do that when it comes to leading a department.
The ugly is actually a little bit of what you just mentioned.
Mm,
And it is my choice to be there as early as I am,
yeah.
but being the one who has to take care of the logistics in
Mm,
regards to if somebody's out, finding subplans, getting
yeah.
coverage, which it turns out not all department chairs do that. That's just something that I do.
Oh,
And I've always done, but I think it's important that I do it.
yikes.
And I always try to be polite about it. When I say I need you to cover this class, I mean, I try to ask, but I'm not asking. And that's ugly.
Right.
But if the person is having an emergency at home with their spouse, with their kid, with their animal, that's their life and that's important. And I'm going to do what I can to take care of what I can at school. That's part of the ugly of it because it's kind of thankless.
Yeah, 100%.
And so that's part of the ugly. Some of the other uglies can be if you do have somebody in the department who is not very strong,
Mm,
and when you are in world language,
mhm.
if you do have somebody who is a singleton who is not very strong and so is killing the program,
It's hard. Yeah.
and that becomes very difficult and you know it's hard
Mm,
to advocate for language in general. It becomes hard to be somebody who advocates for languages other than your own when I need to
mm,
advocate for my language as well. So that's awkward and ugly right there.
yeah.
Balancing the advocacy. I like to tell people that when we first added Chinese at Peachtree Ridge, because we do offer French, Spanish, Latin, Chinese, and then the Spanish for native speakers, which is exploding and probably eating away at some of the other languages. Our
Right.
Chinese teacher at the time, when we would have programs, he would jump out in front of everybody and scream, "Take Chinese."
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when we kind of adopted we advocate for the taking of language. We don't advocate for one
Yeah.
language or the other. And that becomes very awkward when you have somebody who can't sustain the language, isn't, the program is not certified in something else.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's awkward. It gets even more awkward when your principal needs to cut and looks at places to cut and cuts the
Mm.
position.
Yeah.
That's awkward, that's ugly.
Mhm.
Or they decide that instead of really cutting the position, they're going to make it untenable for the person, and try to
Mm.
encourage the person to leave. These
Right.
are awkward. This is ugly. It can be kind of stressful if you like the person on a personal basis.
Mm.
That can be very rough in a larger department. That is a challenge. I never really thought that I would have to deal with on the level that I
Mm.
have to deal with it, because then how do you explain that to other people in the department?
Right.
Um, the awkward can be something as simple as a teacher wanting to teach a particular level
Mm-hmm.
and you're not letting them,
Mm. Oh.
because the person who's already teaching it is doing a bang up job.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's Spanish and the person who wants to teach it is a native speaker and the
Mm-hmm.
other person is not,
Yeah.
that can be very awkward.
Yeah.
And like I'm like, why would I change it? Like, I'm sorry, why would I change it?
Right.
And just because you're the native speaker here doesn't mean you're going to do it. So that's, I mean, that's some of it's the interpersonal things that make it great, but it's also the interpersonal things that make it really awkward.
Yeah. Well, and I'm thinking of a friend of mine who I was just talking to this morning in a district that will go unnamed, that is very like is not hiring literally any new teachers this year. And it's a large district because they're millions of dollars. They've cut so many jobs, millions of dollars in debt. Like they've really mismanaged things. So there is no like new teacher orientation. There's no, it's just like,
Oh,
hi, everyone's still here if you still have a job. So she's got to deliver the news, I think, Monday of who's officially needs now, like a month before they start, not 3 weeks maybe, who's displaced where, who they're going. And a lot of it's languages and entire levels. So, like, to your point of delivering like crappy news, she's got to have some of those same conversations of like, bad news, we don't offer Chinese anymore,
yeah.
and we don't offer elementary French, and we don't offer. And so she's also seeing these decisions come down that she doesn't have any say in as a language teacher, and as also like a person who's the district kind of head informally. Do you feel any frustration with that kind of thing of, like you said, and I've always like taken that sentiment and credited you of, it doesn't matter the language, it matters the level. If they want to take Latin, we don't need to be saying, oh, don't take Latin, who are you going to talk to, the Pope, or whatever, and all the silly things that Latin teachers hear, just like the silly things we all hear for our language. But instead just advocating for them to keep going. Do you feel sometimes those decisions are made by people who don't quite understand what we do?
I think yes. And I
Mm-hmm.
would say, in my response to the scenario that you just described, is it should not be, if that person is a department chair, she
Mm-hmm.
should not be the one who's delivering that news. That should come
Right.
from the principal, the assistant principal.
Right.
And even though I'm part of those scenarios that I talked about, I'm not the one who's going to deliver the news. So I have a teacher
Mm-hmm.
in my department who did not make a full-time schedule, is going to have to teach
Yeah.
outside of the department. I said, I'm not the one telling her that. I don't make the money.
Mm-hmm.
They don't pay me enough. Because one of the ugly things about being a department chair is the stipend really doesn't make it worth it.
No.
In maybe it's better in other districts, but
Mm.
it's not. And this is, to me, this level of leadership that you have that is never
Yeah.
leveraged quite enough,
Mm-hmm.
because in some cases there are people who want to do it, and then in other cases you have people you beg to do it.
Yeah.
And maybe if you actually made it more of the teacher leader position and compensated a little bit more and gave them a little bit more to it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah. So to that point, yes, that's very awkward. I would not deliver that news.
Yeah.
I'd be
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
sorry,
Yeah. Be
that's
like,
actually above my
nope.
pay grade.
Yeah, right. No, 100%. And I just don't know how you justify, well, anyway, we know why they think they need to and all of those kind of things, but it's just, another thing that I think content-wise is hard because people don't know what we do. Or you have somebody, you have an administrator who's evaluating you who's like, "Oh, I took French, bonjour." And you're like, "Oh, here we go." Or all of the like language experiences that we all hear, right? "Oh, you're a
Right.
language teacher." You're like, "Oh no." Like, don't tell me how many years you took and you don't remember a thing and blah blah blah. Um
I
so
will
that
say,
yeah.
I do want to just kind of go back to that, languages being cut.
Hmm.
Um, I had, unrelatedly, I had a really not fun, difficult, ugly interaction with a teacher a couple years ago.
Mm.
And like, not last year, but the year before, that teacher said to me, "I get it. I see the big picture now." And I was like, okay, because I think at the time we were so stuck in our with our trees, we don't see the forest and sometimes the big picture of it.
Mm.
There for a while at Peachtree Ridge High School, when we first really went with the STEM, STEAM, SPIRE, all of that, science was given so many points they didn't need
Hmm.
that lots of programs were hurting. I didn't know that. I'm only advocating for my program.
Right.
So, in my languages, and sometimes it's good to know that, now at the same time, I believe that physical education is being given a point that they don't need. And
Hmm.
I'm kind of like, what? Because hello, I could always use more points. And
Yes.
so sometimes, when we are just advocating and we are just in our bubbles and we are advocating for our languages and they tell no, it maybe isn't necessarily for the language. It could be,
Mm.
nobody's getting it, or it's because they're pursuing a pet project.
Right. It's
And
so
and
interesting.
and not knowing the bigger picture is sometimes is good.
Hmm.
And sometimes it's because, believe me, when science started losing some of those bloated points, it didn't go well.
Right.
Only the rest of us were like, finally,
Right.
it's going to balance it out.
Yeah. Well, and two, with huge classes, I mean, just, yeah, you're like, we could use these points or, positions to get some of these classes down from 36, 35. I mean, it's like, geez Louise, you're trying to, even just the equipment, like the language labs, you're like, they only fit
Yeah.
36. Stop putting
Yep.
38 in there.
Right.
Like I don't have two more headsets. Like, just logistically, it just is really, really hard. Um, what's the best part of being department chair? Like, what's the good, what's the great, what is there anything you look forward to like regularly, or just sort of like glimmers of like positivity?
I think for me, and I, I think you maybe have to know me a little bit to
Mhm.
fully understand this answer. I am pretty introverted. I will keep to myself a lot. I have been, and I'm very proud of this. It's Leo season. I'm going to brag because I'm a Leo.
That's right, your birthday's
This is
coming up.
That's right. This is what I feel most proud of as a department chair, is that I think maybe with the exception of 1 year,
Mhm.
um, all of my departments, as I've had them for the 20 years, they are a pretty cohesive group. They all get along. With the exception of maybe 1 or 2 years. And so, I mean, 18 good ones to 2 bad ones. And
Yeah.
how I set that up where everybody gets along, and I mean, I don't know what it is that I do necessarily, but I know that people want to come and at least check it out where I am, because of the way that I am, and the way that the departments work together. And I am pretty proud of that.
Yeah.
And I think some of it is that I am kind of responsive to their needs. Like,
Mhm.
at the end of the year last year, my Spanish teachers were like, "So we're getting new materials."
Mhm.
Like, "That's right. So you need time to work."
Right.
So, and that's, and I told you, I usually do a big thing. I try to be inspiring. I try to remind people. I
Yep.
didn't do it this year for
Yeah.
various reasons, but one of it is these Spanish teachers especially need time because they're going to have to develop new things and they're all going to have to develop it together.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, well, in the gift of time, like you're a very receptive, perceptive person too. So I think some people try to do that in sort of like outward, I don't know, maybe personality based ways of just of like putting it all out there while they're doing it. But to me, you're more like you're perceiving the same things and going like, you okay? Kind of a thing without being like, I don't know, weird about like loud about it or something. I feel like a lot of people just I don't know. What do I want to say? Just I don't know. Fill the space with noise just because they can, and you're more of just like a hey, I noticed, which I appreciate because not everybody wants all of their stuff out in front of everybody. I don't know if that makes
I
sense.
think you have to, I think you have to remember, and maybe that's not true for everybody, but this is what I would say to anybody, that the ultimate role of a department chair is
Mhm.
to support your teachers.
Yeah.
That's not what you're going to start doing,
Mhm.
then maybe that's not what you really want to do.
Right.
And so you have to sort of take a step back from yourself.
Mm.
Have to understand that is, teaching is a thankless profession to begin with
Oh.
in so many ways. So stepping up to do the poorly compensated department chair role
Mhm.
is even more thankless, but I think it becomes very
Yeah.
important. And I you, if you're not going to support your teachers,
Yeah. Then why bother?
what are you doing? Like
Mhm.
what are you doing? So some people who tell me about department chairs that they had at other places, I'm kind of like, why would they be that way?
Right.
And yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, 100. Didn't we figure out what the stipend was one time? It's like $6 a day or something. Like
it's
literally.
well, you and I had it, 13 cents a day or something like that.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I mean, like we figured out we were
it
like,
has, in
oh,
20 years, it has
not
never
good.
changed.
Oh, that's amazing. Of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and the duties just get more and more. But like you said, almost different, or they evolve, I should say. They just keep kind of turning. Um, which is really, really interesting. I didn't realize that. But now that you say that, I hadn't thought about that. Less and less evaluative, but I guess so. Like I hadn't noticed that until you said that. And now I'm like, oh yeah, maybe.
And I
Hmm.
don't think people realize that you have a good department chair until you
Mm,
don't anymore,
yes.
or you've not, and so to me,
Mm,
that's sort of an interesting thing. Or I'll ask other teachers, well, doesn't your department chair? And they'll be like, no. And
no.
I think that's so they're poorly assigned duties, really, other than
Yeah.
some. And so you get to fill it in with your own creative paintbrush, and
Yeah.
you have to have a little empathy,
Hmm.
and a desire to try to make people be um, better teachers. And
Well,
that can be writing emails for people.
yeah.
That can be talking through an interaction that they had with a kid.
Mhm.
That can be simply going with them to talk to an administrator. That
Mm,
can be leaving them completely alone because they don't need your help. And
right.
it's figuring that out too. So I
Yeah.
have a teacher right now who sends me her emails and asks me to clean them up because to her they're too Spanglishy. And
Sure.
okay, fine. I'm
Right.
happy to do that.
Absolutely.
They're never too Spanglishy.
Right.
So
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, and seeking or asking the support that people need, I think is so important. Like and being honest about like, okay, it's either literally like we can pay for you to go to the state conference this year because you've never been, or sorry, can't, moving right along, or you need more time, like, or you need, I mean, I'm thinking of like all things that I never saw until being at Peachtree Ridge. And then it was like, oh, this is nice. Like you said, like not realizing kind of what you don't have till you have it. And then you're like, oh, this is quite an upgrade. It's like getting a new TV after having the same TV for a long time. You're like,
yeah.
this is so sharp, like it was really a difference.
And it's also sometimes um trying to filter school initiatives
Mm,
through a lens that your department
yeah.
can work with, which for us is often very easy. Like, what? No, because the current, this is embarrassing, but I'm going to put it on the record. At the beginning of the year last year, we got a new uh, administrator over our department,
Mhm.
and he was a new administrator, period.
Okay.
And he had been a math department chair,
Okay.
and math talks data.
Mm.
And in Gwinnett, you know, the standards, the AKS for math, I guess, are really concrete, but for language, they're like, I can ask a question.
Mm-hmm.
And so he throws up this PowerPoint, and then he opens up this Excel of all of these data, and that we were going to have all of these data discussions. And I really should have been embarrassed when the department started laughing at him,
Oh.
but I didn't stop it because I finally, because I was kind of sitting in the back, and finally I said, I think you need to take a minute and go look at our, as straight faced as I could, and go look at our AKS, and you'll understand that we can't do it.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, taking those initiatives and figuring out how we can have those
Yeah.
conversations. You know, I've come up with a lot of things that I thought were really good, that we never really ended up using because the
Mm.
school started initiatives and then the school year goes and then we don't follow through on them.
True. Yeah.
You know, so yeah, and there are initiatives that the school has gone through that I've thought are stupid and haven't really done. And then just said, we can't do that. You know, there's too many languages, too many singletons, leave
Yeah.
us alone. So yeah, but that was, I should be embarrassed by the fact that they started laughing at him, but I,
Yeah. You're like,
had
that's,
I known it was coming,
mhm.
had I
Right.
known it was coming, but I didn't. And so,
Nope, too late. You're like, here we are. Because I
sorry,
don't
this isn't
mind,
awkward at
there's
all.
so many, right? It's so awkward. There are so many things that we can compare and look at. I mean, and we've had, those conversations of between level to level expectations, which I think is important, or assessments, aligning assessments. Like for me, from you, that was always like a non-negotiable of like, you don't need to be in lockstep, but you need to be giving the same stuff. They can't say, and I'm going to use Ryan here. Like, it can't be like Ryan played the audio 15 times and gave the quiz like a totally different quiz, whereas Meredith played the audio 3 times and hers was, whatever. I'm trying to think of just stark differences that we know happen all the time. You gave it multiple choice. She gave it like open ended, super hard, or whatever the students perceive, because we always know they're going to also like kind of hyperbolize and all those kind of things. But to me, that was an important, like, no, you need to do the following. And this is why, because you can't just be doing wildly different things. To me, there's such good stuff there for comparison, but it's not necessarily like data. I don't, like,
Well, it can't necessarily be data because it's not apples to apples. For most
right.
of us, it's apples to oranges, and you can't
Right.
really compare them, or apples to peaches.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, and two, I always appreciated have always appreciated that you could have like different experiences in the department, have a different sort of pedagogical approach, have a different, but with all of that said, like you still need to collaborate. There's a heavy culture of sharing, and there needs to be. Like, I can't imagine somebody closing their door and just, I guess unless they're a singleton, but even two, that would be weird, and saying to you like, no, I'm good, I don't want to collaborate with anybody. Like, to me, no, like you can't do that. Melanie's gonna tell you no. She's gonna get you. Like, that's not okay, because to me that's also some of the culture of our district, or at least when I came into it, that was the Gwinnett I was shown, was like share, 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 then share some more. If you're doing the game on Thursday and you need the game board, I'll do it Wednesday and I'll borrow it. Like, it was very collaborative, and I feel like you uphold that also, when it would be easy not to. Like, people could.
And again, I think that that's the role of a department chair,
Mhm.
because yes, it should be, that's the message that we're receiving.
Yeah.
But
Mm.
if your main person of influence isn't asking for that, providing a framework for that,
Yeah.
it's not going to happen. So
Yeah.
that's because it does come to it that there are people who will slam their doors and not share. But if the framework is there, it gets a lot harder.
Mhm. Yeah. No, absolutely. I think, yeah, to me, that's just, I'm like, no, you can't just be doing your own thing. I know we had some conversations too, a few years ago, when we had two on my course team, two particularly young at the time people who, one, I finally was like, you've got to stop like nodding your head in meetings. Like when the 4 or 5 of us would meet, go like, yep, no problem. And then go edit the quiz or go add your own vocabulary. I was like, we're not giving the same thing. Like, is that to me seems totally normal. And she was finally like, oh, sorry. I feel like my kids aren't ready for what we decide on by the time I give it. And it was like, well, that's a different conversation. Like, then we
Yeah.
need to talk about that instead of like you changing it. Then we go to compare results and you gave a totally different thing, or you gave more hints, you gave more scaffolding, you changed a cognate from like entender, which is way more common than comprender, but you changed it to comprender so that they would, ironically, comprender. And all the things like, as a department, is that big enough to have, like, what do you do in a situation with that? Because it kind of resolved itself, but like, if it was even a thing to, maybe that's not the right verb, to be resolved, but like, do you see those kind of conversations happening? And do you think I've always seen you as a person who thinks that's important to address too. Like, do you see a lot of that? And I don't know, what does like a decent department chair do to encourage sharing and I don't know, having the confidence to like just give the thing we decided on?
So I I guess not as much of that gets to me as maybe you
Mhm.
think, and some
Sure.
of that is
Okay.
singletons,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Um, some of that is because perhaps it resolves itself in the department.
Mhm.
And then maybe some of that is because of the way it is laid out. Here, you are working as a course team, you have the freedom to do this much,
Hmm.
but our assessments need to be the same.
Right.
And here's why. And let's talk about common experiences. And Peachtree Ridge being on the block, we shake it all up
Yeah.
in December and find ourselves with new teachers, and everybody needs to be at the same place. And
Hmm.
if they're not, that becomes a problem. And so I think with that in the framework, not a lot of that gets back to me.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, and as in my teaching role where I teach mostly upper level, I don't collaborate as much as
Oh,
and I in the past few
pardon.
years I have, but this year I won't as much.
Mhm.
And so it in some ways where I'm at my own little singleton, that can be very hard for me to be like, just do my stuff.
Right.
And so that's always a learning for me, but it tends to go the other way. And the problem I think I'm having now in the department is that there's one teacher who's creating everything and nobody else is offering.
Oof.
And that tends to
Yeah.
be what I hear more is the flip
Yeah.
side to it. Not I'm going to dumb this down. It's please give me everything, including your daily slides,
Right.
because I am incapable of coming up with anything. And
Right.
and so this is one of the ways that we ended the year was, look, y'all are getting a new curriculum.
Hmm.
You are really, this is an opportunity for you all to really start contributing and collaborating on a level that you haven't.
Right.
And that's what I tend to see more.
Yeah.
I'm doing
It's
everything and they're
so
just taking.
Yeah. That is so interesting because I feel like, and I wonder if you've seen this too, like at conferences or different, like, there's always various, I mean, here in summer, there's all these like different PD things and stuff and webinars and whatever, clearly. And, and a lot of times when it's like a content creator, they're sharing stuff. And what do you see? Like either the comments, like literally physically in the in-person session, like at Flag or Sculpt or whatever, or like in the comments are like, but what did you do if X? But what do you do when Y? And it's almost like that same kind of thing where the person gave you, some incredible creator gave you like a full slide deck for a whole unit or all of their assessments or whatever it is. And it's like people still have a hard time or maybe don't have that confidence to like know what to do or to create their own. I don't know. I find that interesting because I see teachers in general. I'm like, we're a creative bunch, guys. But maybe, I don't know. Is it creativity? Is it confidence? Do you think it's
It's
both?
it's
It's just
it's
easier not to?
that, but it's also kind of knowing what to do with the creativity and sort of understanding it. We are, and this is one of the evolutions of teaching that I was sort of referring to.
Yeah.
We are at a place now where there's a massive teacher shortage. Nobody wants to do this.
Yeah.
And so school districts have to be very creative hiring And where that manifests itself is in languages, right? Because I mean, that's where we've been dealing with it for a very long time, where we
Right.
don't have, and some walk right in and have the potential to be great.
Right.
You know, Jimena, who we worked with, her first year was like, woo, but
Mhm.
she figured it out. She's creative. She learned, she grew, she
Mhm.
played, right?
Yeah.
That I don't see that as much. And so I think, when you have people who come in from an alternate path, whatever that is, they don't have the safety net of student teaching where you fail a little and then get supported.
Yeah.
Or, hey, let's talk about why this went wrong, because you don't have anybody really to do that with, because mentoring is not a
Right.
thing as it should
No.
be.
Right.
I,
Especially not in the moment, day to day.
and so yeah, they're just taking because then it's already planned and they can go. And I think in some cases they don't necessarily know that they need to come up with it.
Right.
Yeah, you have the content knowledge, but just having the content knowledge doesn't really necessarily help explain how to impart it, how to really work it, how to handle it when kids don't get it. And some of that, not all of that, is covered in a traditional teacher training coursework. But
Right.
we are not adapting as a profession fast enough to alternate certification people.
Right.
And
Right.
Gwinnett does have Teach Gwinnett, but it comes after they've already taught for a while.
I was gonna say it's a little
And
late. Yeah.
and like, you're doing that now? You've been in this classroom for a year and a half and you're just now starting Teach Gwinnett?
Right.
Wait, no, that's not how this should work.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I did my 100 years ago, when I went through my program, I was in school for a year long as an internship, and they pulled me out
Right.
every time they had new teacher staff development. And I was out for the whole day. And
Interesting.
I don't remember any of that, but it was more general. And I'm
Right.
like, why aren't we doing that? Like, why aren't we sending them, why aren't we, where is the classroom management stuff? Where is this? Where is that?
Mm.
And I actually spoke up about that a little bit last year with my principal. And he's like, yeah, we're addressing it. It's coming. We've got people in the building who are masters at this. And I'm like, wow, I can't wait to see how this is going to work out.
Where are
Because
they?
if you're a master of this in math class,
Right.
that's not going to fly in social studies. That's not going to fly in language. And it's probably not going to fly in language arts.
Right.
But okay, you're addressing it.
Yeah.
Because I mean, there's a lot of, to me, and I'm going off on a little tangent here that I
Mm.
don't mean to, but I think a lot of the issues that schools are having with kids in the hallways,
Mm.
um, it's because teachers don't know how to keep them in.
Yeah.
The
Absolutely.
phones are an issue. Like all these districts around us, pulling up phones like, come on, GCPS, but they're not.
Yes, but
I'm
they're
not
like,
gonna go
I don't
on a
know.
tangent on that, but I
Oh,
but I do think that is sort of the awkward and the ugly as well.
yeah.
And is an evolution, is how do you support somebody who has no teacher training whatsoever?
Right. Right.
Because nobody else is going to do it if you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And then how do you handle it when other people in your department are like, so I have a master's degree in this,
Right.
and I'm like, this isn't high, I'm not necessarily the one who hired the person, or there's a shortage and this is what was out there, or
Sure.
PS, it's September and we're hiring.
Right.
And so there's all kinds of, what do we do? Because it's not 2008 where we
Right.
were anymore, where we were all just happy to have jobs.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, and it's just also like I feel like too the profession is so different in terms of even like what it looks like day to day. Like in theory, it's not when someone says, "Oh, Melanie, she's a teacher," people are like, "Oh, that," and then they just say whatever weird stuff we're all used to. But they have an expectation. But I feel like it's also come so far from what that was, like post COVID, especially, and like you said, with the phones, with different policies, with um absenteeism, with like all of these things where you're like, holy moly, people have no idea. And so that I think that is part of the thing that maybe people don't know what they're getting into. They're like, I want to teach algebra. So I know algebra and I want to be a teacher. And there was somebody in my like women's educator group here locally. They always there's always like some new teachers at certain buildings that they support and go help and buy stuff for. We'll use grant money and whatever, just support and kind of like pet projects. And the one of the gals said that last year she talked to somebody, and I hope this doesn't sound ridiculous, but I just found it funny. She said one of the gals she talked to was had graduated college, was taking like a year, and then was going to teach for a couple years, save money, and then go to law school. And she was like, okay, well, I don't know if you've picked the right job for like the money saving part, but you might be living at home. Like there might be something really advantageous about that. But they came into pre-planning, and the same gal walked in and was like, oh my goodness. And genuinely earnestly goes like, oh my gosh, I guess they skipped me. Like they haven't come and decorated my room yet. When do they come? Like 100% serious. And my friend was like, who's retired and just coming back volunteering, so she's 40 years of experience, etc. She was like, oh no, like nobody told you that they're, who are they, and she was like, and she said it just got funnier and funnier because this person was legitimately dumbfounded, like, well, no, what do you mean I get it? Like with what? Girl, with your money. Like that's with what? And she was like, where do I go? And my friend's like, okay, so let's talk places, like there's Target, there's Amazon, there, whatever. I mean, they're all, what can you do? But yeah, she was like, you need to, like, that's why I'm here to help you, but you need to get some stuff. But this person was just so, as one logistical example. And then she said just the rest of pre-planning like kind of glazed over, because it was like, yeah, not only do you need to post your week at a glance, your agenda, assignments in Google Classroom, like here's our communication platform. I mean, all of this stuff that we know exists, and we're in a place with a lot of stuff. So that makes a difference where it's a lot to learn. But here's the assessment platform. Here's just like the list went on, and it was like, don't forget to decorate, and learn all these things. She was completely overwhelmed and blindsided by that. And I think that's probably the experience for a lot of people is like, well, I'm going to give this a shot, but it's way harder than it looks. I think harder now maybe than ever.
Yes, yes.
Like in a lot of ways.
Yes, because the teacher training isn't there.
Yeah.
The phones make it hard.
Yes.
Education's response to COVID was really to be like, it's okay, you can turn it in whenever you want, and kids are still like that.
Yeah.
Where they just try to do a semester's worth of coursework in a week.
Right. Right.
And that is something that I am gonna try to address. This is gonna kind of be my initiative
Mhm.
this year. There she
Yeah.
is, by the way. I'm just gonna put her on there
Lucy. Yes,
for
Lucy.
posterity. She's hungry. Um,
Oh, Lucy's like, lady, it is time for dinner. Come on.
it's time for her night meal. So yeah, I knew she'd make it down here eventually. But
That's
anyway,
right. She's like,
I mean, the one initiative that I am gonna throw out is to try to, because it is very stressful at the end of this semester to have all of these kids. What can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And then, I mean, I had two kids who they missed 80% of French 4, but because of the way that it is, I had to pass them. And because you have to let them do their tests and quizzes. And I
Yep.
mean, I'm not saying they got A's, but they passed. And I'm like, what the heck? And
Sheesh.
one of them is sitting in my French 5 class. And I thought I had the ability to kick her out.
Right.
Thought, she's gonna fail. And so I'm gonna try to get her out because they are playing the system where you don't, and I took this very hard. This was very hard for me.
Yes.
I'm not gonna let it happen. I'm just gonna be like, here's your due date. Oh, did you miss the due date? Then you better get it in by this point or it's done. And I'm
Yeah.
gonna make that very clear on every assignment, which is a level of micromanaging I'm not good at.
Oh,
But I'm gonna do it because for my own sanity, because we've had this whole conversation. We've been going at it for 50 minutes. We've never talked about teacher mental health.
right. Right.
And which I play a role in that too.
Mhm.
And
Absolutely.
one way or the other, and how to deal with it. And I mean, my year last year started with one of the teachers in my department whose child was basically having a breakdown. And
Wow.
so she was having a breakdown. And I was like, oh God, like I didn't, but
Yeah.
all I could do was be there,
Yeah.
right? All I could do was be there. And there's part of you that is like, I don't have time for this.
Right. Right.
but I have to make the time for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have to be there to help the person. And, she wanted me to go with her to tell Jad about it, our principal. And
Yeah.
then we went to talk to a counselor about it. She wanted me to be there. And I'm happy to be that person. But, that's something else we're not talking about. You've got that going on in your home life.
Right.
Excuse me, that going on in your home life. But then you have to come and do this. And then
Right.
do this for
Right.
all of the kids.
Right.
And there's that's something else that you sort of have to talk about. And that is something that I have sort of,
Mm,
I think, really tried to be mindful of.
mm,
And if people are struggling, to try to find a way to work with them so that they're not, or so that it's better,
mm.
especially if they own it.
Yeah.
I'm certainly not gonna work with somebody who's like, "Ah, I have problems," and then runs away. I'm like, thank you for
Right.
dumping on me, but how can I help you work through this?
Yeah.
And that is something that we're not talking about either, really, which, I mean, that's us as a society.
Right, right. Well, and I think too about how insulting it feels, like you said, with the phones, with the this, with the that, like with the thousand distractions that kids have. And again, you're like teaching your ass off, and then
Trying.
like you said, and somebody's like, right, or trying, at the very least. Um, and then a kid's like, hey, this is my mountain of, work for, like you said, like here's a semester of French 4 in, 2 days. This is okay. So not only did I not do it till now, which is like, ugh, insulting, but then also, hey, do you have time at the time when you have the least time to grade this all, or at least do some kind of, and you're a person too. Oh, something just fell or something. My dogs are now going rogue. You're a person too who holds like your work in such high regard that I imagine it's easy if somebody has low standards for themselves. I'm sure they're like, all right, here you go, Tommy, like do your work.
Yeah.
But that feels so icky to me and totally erodes that, like you said, like that mental health or just kind of that objective. Like at the end of the day, for me at least, before transitioning to this technology role, I found myself going more and more like, what am I doing this for? Like, what is this? What are we doing here?
Yeah.
And I don't know what we do about that, except for, like you said, like the phone policies, like there are things that other places are doing, but that's super, super hard. Like
Well, I
super
think you
hard.
you have to meet it where it is. And
Mhm.
there are kids who legitimately have issues and who legitimately need more time.
Totally.
I tend to tell you well in advance.
Right. Right.
But some of these kids, they just don't want to come to school. They sleep through it. And in some ways it works in other courses because they can just read the book, show up for the test and take it and go
Yeah.
on. Doesn't
Yeah.
really work that way for us. And so this is going to be the one department initiative that I'm going to try to put forward, because there's always strength on it if it's a department policy.
Right.
And
Ooh.
I know it's going to ask for everybody else, but I guess if you assign it and you say due date
Mhm.
August 7th,
Right.
right? Um, will accept until,
Mhm.
August 14th, and
Yeah.
then no more.
Yeah.
And then you're done. And then if you make that really clear,
Okay.
even the kids, if you want to stay home and do it, that's fine. And
Right.
I'm just gonna have to work a little harder to make that expectation, because we are not helping them,
Mm-mm.
preparing them for college, preparing them for any other course, any of that. We're not helping them. And
Right.
so I in my in my role as a teacher, but then also as department chair, this is something that I'm just going to try to do.
Yeah. Well, I know as a teacher too, I appreciated all, again, the very selective intentional things that you did to say like, no, this is department policy. Like, and I think all teachers appreciate like we as a department don't do X, because then you have like a party line, but you're also like, if there's some social accountability there of like, don't do it, like I don't want to be talking to you in your classroom after school, and then a kid comes in and they're like, here's this work from August, and it's October, because you're like, what was that? Did he just say August? Like
Yeah.
you can kind of help hold each other accountable and go like, are we, what are you doing there? And that's a nice, it's to me, that's like a boundaries, yeah, mental health kind of rule for yourself of like, because I probably would accept everything. Absolutely, I would, to like the end of time, which
And
is
I
not
don't,
helpful. Not helpful.
it's not helpful. We're not doing these kids any favors,
Right.
and they're taking
Yeah,
advantage of it in a
absolutely.
way. And so I think we need to push back. I don't know how that's going to go as a department, but it is something that I'm going to try. I know that I can get my, my singleton level, I can 100% do it. And my one
Yeah.
course team person, I think will go with it. I mentioned it um in a message this summer, and I should really respond, but we'll talk about it, I guess, tomorrow.
Yeah.
But I
Fabulous.
just
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
sometimes we have to help kids help themselves,
Yeah.
and sometimes we have to help schools help themselves, and
Yeah.
sometimes, I have to help teachers help themselves.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
this is, and ultimately, again, it goes to teacher support, and this might be a level of support that they
Absolutely.
don't know that they need.
I was gonna say literally, like it feels like, when kids don't know what's best for themselves, but we do, and so it's like,
Yeah,
I think this is gonna be a good thing. I just don't, maybe like, yeah, if somebody had an issue with it, it's like, I don't think you just quite see how it's a good thing. I think it's a great thing. Absolutely.
yeah,
Because it's so helpful. And it's just like, yep, sorry, latest I can take it is the 12th, like you said, or the
yeah,
14th or whatever. So
yeah.
that's it. And it's nice for parents too, a boundary. That way it's not, hey,
Well,
can
and to make that very clear, because quite
yeah,
frankly, this is not ninth grade language arts where you read Romeo and
right.
Juliet and then you're done. And
Mhm.
then you read uh, whatever, and then you're
Right.
done. And here's a
Right.
couple poems, and then you're done. And let's talk about, how to write a research paper, and then you're
Yeah.
done. We build on.
Yeah. It's not
And
compartmentalized.
so you've got to, we're going to work on this listening skill. You've got to work on it the whole way through. It doesn't get better if you do all 27 listening assignments in one night.
Right. And who's going to also make them available to you and make sure that you can, that's exhausting.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it will, Google Classroom, you can close it and
Mhm.
it's not going to open.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. No, I think it's going to be great. We need a follow up. We need a part two and be like, how's it going?
we'll see. We'll
I'm
see.
sorry.
But yeah,
Dot, dot, dot.
it
Coming
is,
kind of haggard.
you think about the initiatives that have come up, and the ones that stick and the ones that
Yeah.
don't. And I like to think about some that I don't even remember, but
Mm,
that I didn't like, and then I couldn't understand why the whole department didn't like it. Like, what is wrong with
right.
this? Oh, it's because I didn't like it, and they fed off me. Um,
100%.
and
Yeah.
so I don't,
So
we'll
easy.
see, we'll see. But
Yeah.
this is out of control, and these kids think that they can pass it at the last minute,
Yeah.
and we're just not going to play that game.
Yeah. Well, you can't in languages.
Try
Then they
it.
start playing languages against each other. Like we were saying, like, don't take Chinese, take French. She's so nice. And don't take whatever. It's like, no, this needs to be as
Yeah,
streamlined as possible because the kids are absolutely going to play that game. Who wouldn't? Of course they
right,
are. Tales
right.
old as time.
I mean, here they are in class,
That's right. And you're like, are
not
we
doing
sure?
it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. I only have one more question for you, which was just as we
okay.
wrap up here. What's been the most, well, maybe you've already said it like in a number of ways, but what's been the most unexpected? Because you have so much great experience. And also just because like I know you and your age, you were a very young department chair. Like that's, I think of a person, like if I had a department chair right now that was,
Oh,
I mean, like like early 30, like that's a young, that'd be a young, to me, that's a young department chair.
I don't know, because by the time it was my 10th year of teaching when I became department chair.
Yeah, I guess so. That still
And
feels,
so
I don't
I
know.
was, that's
It feels like
weird,
that
but
meme that says like, I remember reading, seeing it a few years ago. It was like, have children, I am children, and that's like, I'm like, that's it. I'm raising myself here, guys, like
yeah.
still. So I think of that, like, you've been doing it so long and it's such a like great, like, I don't know what the word is. I want like section, like just part of your teaching career. Cause yeah, you started with like a decade of experience. So it's not like you were inexperienced, but I don't know, anything unexpected that if you told your like new department chair, like literally you're starting tomorrow in pre-planning, first day as department chair, Peachtree Ridge, is there anything that you would have told that self now that self would be like, nah, shut up. Like, no way that's going to happen, or no way I'm going to feel that way, or just anything that would blow like younger you's mind, or pretty much everything's been kind of gradual and has evolved and
I mean, I can't think of an example for that right off the top of my head. I mean, I think, I I think I was, I didn't, I didn't know what I was walking into when I walked into Peachtree Ridge High School. I
yeah.
had to be department chair, learn a culture, run a department kind of all at the same time. And so that was quite the trial by fire.
Yeah.
You know, I don't necessarily recommend that.
Right.
No, don't come
Yeah.
into a new school and be in a new district, and especially one like
Mm.
Gwinnett that has so much,
Yeah.
you know, because where I
Layers.
was before, it was like much looser.
Yeah.
I think so I don't, I mean, I think the biggest, I would have never thought, I guess I'll go with this one. I would have never thought in a million hundred gabillion years
Mhm.
that a decision that I made as department chair,
Mhm.
that I slaved and that I agonized over,
Mhm.
would hurt somebody so bad
Mhm.
that they would really come after me with deeply hurtful words,
Ooh, okay,
very
sure. The
personal,
personal, yeah.
attacking words,
Yeah.
on a level
Mm.
you know, and then I had to go work with this person who was still in the department after that,
Huh.
and you know, I am probably most proud that I could continue to treat that person professionally.
Sure.
And so I guess when it comes down to that, you know, I agonized over that decision. I would have never, knowing, even had I known that that was coming,
Mm. Sure.
I still would have made the decision that I made
Mhm.
because it was the right decision.
Mhm.
In terms of who I am as a growth, everybody take language person.
Yeah.
But then to have that come back at me with just the viciousness, the rage,
Yeah, yeah.
and some of the things that were said, no, I would not have had
Yeah.
50, about to be 53-year-old me telling
Woo.
33-year-old me that that was going to happen. No.
Yeah.
So that, I guess that would be the thing, and you maybe have to sort of, if you are going to be department chair, you have to maybe be prepared that
Mm.
some people have the potential to get really ugly and may not like your decisions. And while most people will just quietly go and be like all teachers and passively aggressively complain about
Right.
them behind your back,
Right.
there are some who may
Right.
attack you,
Yeah.
and
Oof.
you know,
Yeah. That
just
feels
be like,
like too, that feels like
go
toothpaste you
high
can't
when
put
they
back.
go low.
Yeah, I was right, right. I would say that feels like toothpaste you can't put back in the tube either, you know, where you're just like, hmm, that's,
It's that person who told me that they saw the bigger picture like 2 years later, and I was like,
yeah.
wait, it's too late.
Yeah, it's too late. Like,
This does not, this, you telling me this 2 years later does not forgive what you did. And while I am
yeah.
going to treat you professionally, something here died.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know too. Like, I don't know that if I were, yeah, I bet absolutely that would be unexpected. And I don't know, like at 32, you know, I don't know, just as different ages we see ourselves at, like in our lives and just professionally, like that's a tough thing to happen at any age too. But I can't, yeah, like just having the thick skin, because I can't imagine you never expect that. But then you're like, wow, that was upsetting. So the decision sounds like it was upsetting enough. And then for then that to happen, you're like, this is double upsetting.
Yeah.
Like, you know, yeah. Which is really tough. But yeah, the thick skin and kind of like, you know, teaching where it's like they're about to say, you know,
You can't, and you know, there are things that you can say to people who are younger who don't necessarily have the experience for it, and then are probably like, okay, grandma, okay, boomer.
okay,
I
boomer.
am not a boomer. I am not a boomer, but
okay, Gen X.
you can't control other people, and you
Right.
can't make them necessarily do what you want. And so for every person who's on board with you, there is still going to be one who goes in their room and just does what they want anyway.
Yeah.
And there's still going to be one who is maybe not going to attend the meeting or do whatever they
Mhm.
want. And you know, what they bring is solid enough that or they'll just give you just enough that it'll be okay.
Yeah.
And you know, also I think
Mm.
because we're all human, um, to know the power of actually apologizing when you have screwed up.
Sure.
Because we
Sure.
all know that we screw up. I have screwed up.
Mhm. Sure.
Um, in my role as department chair.
Right.
And
Right.
even like with kids, like if I lose my cool when I shouldn't, you know, but I to actually own your crap
Mhm.
as
Yeah.
you know, it, you know, is a little stronger when it's told to me, like own your
Right.
whatever, you know,
Own
this
your
is being
ish.
recorded, so I'm just
Right.
gonna, yeah. So own your crap.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Right.
so I
Well,
would
I
go
think
with
it takes a
those.
certain professional confidence and maturity that I think is important that not everybody has. And maybe that factors into too, like what doesn't make the ideal or most effective department chair is, yeah, not doing those things or not even knowing that they need to be done, you know?
Yeah.
Wow. That's a great place to end too. I super appreciate it. Thank you
Okay.
for letting me invade your Wednesday night. Wait, today's Wednesday, right? Yes. And then we're back to we're back to school tomorrow. So our pre-planning eve. Oh no, I'm not ready. I
Good
know.
way to sort of ease back into it, I
That's
guess.
true. That's true. Back into the, and then you're giving them back their time tomorrow. So they'll be like, oh, thank you. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
also take your time, everybody. Thank you so much. I super duper appreciate it. And if you're watching the recording, we didn't talk about any resources or anything, but if you think of anything, I'll add them, like any articles or anything. I know you're
Penny.
I'm just gonna put your email in the
I
notes.
should.
Any
That's
questions?
fine. I should maybe this is what I should do. I should write the department chair book.
Yes, please. I beg of you. Yes. Like at the very least, like a newsletter. Just
Yeah.
little micro,
A
with
blog.
a blog.
It'll be my TikTok.
That's right. And it'll be the good, the awkward, the ugly. Oh, what TikTok would be fun. Okay, we'll chat. Because I think that would be super helpful.
Yeah.
But anyway, thank you again. Super appreciate you. And have a great day tomorrow. I know you will,
You
but
too.
I'm not
Yeah,
ready,
you
but
too. I'm not
I'll
ready
get
yet.
ready.
I'm not ready. So
I might pull a Melanie and be there real early and be like, but we'll
get
see.
there. You know,
Yay. Well, thanks,
just
friend.
hope
I
so.
appreciate you.
All right. Okay.
Hey, bye.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ryan.
Bye.